Welcome to the In-Between-Man podcast, where men can be men. Where men can be men. All right, today we're going to be talking about the overlooked and challenged benefits of the traditional male value system. I want you all to know that I have a Polar Pop from Circle K. I have an extremely large log of crushed tobacco leaves that's wedged in between my cheek and gum. So if I slur and spit, you don't have to worry, you're not going to get wet. So let's start this thing off by just recapping what we went over in our last episode. Okay. And I don't want to take a long period of time. If you already know what we've talked about and you've listened to the previous podcast, just zoom right through this. It shouldn't take more than 3 to 4 minutes, okay? So the recap is, last episode, we talked about the traditional male value system. We talked about answering the following questions, like, what is the traditional male value system and who created it? We went over the prehistoric and agricultural societies and how they impacted the traditional male value system. We went over philosophical and historical contributions given by Aristotle and others. We talked about various different cultural narratives that were outside of the patriarchal society that had influence on how men were being valued. And then we also had some modern theories as well. Okay, so if you want to get into those details, just rip back to the other episode, the traditional male value system, and check them out. And so what does the traditional male value system represent? We defined masculinity. And there's your answer. And so what are some of the attributes, behaviors, and roles generally associated with men and boys? And we have 4 categories that I'm hoping that I'll be able to use throughout this podcast. Because if we started with those, then we should probably keep them just for the sake of continuity so it doesn't change things up. And so here are some of the attributes, behaviors, and roles generally associated with men and boys. We have toughness and resilience, enduring hardships with or without asking for help. We have the rejection of femininity, and I'm going to change that. I'm going to change it to the rejection of some feminine behaviors. Okay, we have dominance and leadership, and we have honor and responsibilities. And so we went through some of those benefits, okay? Then we discussed the benefits. So we also spent 5 minutes or less trying to determine if there is a traditional female value system that mirrors up with the traditional male value system. And this is what we found. Oh, hold on. I just have a lot of notes, that's all. Okay, so what we found was there is no single, universal, agreed upon traditional female value system that directly mirrors the traditional male value system. But societies have historically set out prescriptive roles and standards for women, just as they have for men. So traditional male value system often emphasizes. And so here are some of the things that for women, traditional value systems have typically centered around. Nurturing and caregiving, like being a good mom, wife, and or daughter, right? This is traditional, okay? I'm not saying today, I'm just saying traditional. Maintaining the household and supporting the family well-being. Okay, I can agree with that. Physical appearance and attractiveness, we know that's true. Modesty and virtue. Emotional expressiveness and empathy. Social harmony and relationship building. And self-sacrificing and putting other needs first. Now, just like the traditional male value system, I'm sure there's probably plenty of women who are like, no, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not doing it anymore. Okay, so we're going to move into what I believe have been overlooked benefits of the traditional male value system in today's society. Okay, and we're going to align them with one of the four definitions, whether it be toughness and resilience. I'm going to create an acronym TNR: rejection of some feminine behavior, dominance and leadership, honor and responsibility. So we're going to align these behaviors that seem to be overlooked and challenged in today's narrative, right? Remember, what's the question that we're constantly asking ourselves? Okay, what's the mission of our podcast, which is, why are men struggling today? That should be the question that you ask yourself throughout the entire podcast. Why are men struggling today? And the information that I'm sharing with you, by the way, I will publish this to the web so that anybody can look at my notes and see where I came up with this stuff. Just about all the information that I'm sharing with you has come from Perplexity.ai. And so, you can run those questions that I'm asking and sharing with you in the podcast through Perplexity and see what you come back with. Again, I'm not an expert. I'm not a professor. I'm not, someone who claims to be proficient in anything. I'm just someone who has a passion for trying to understand why men are struggling today, because I went through a personal period. I'm totally sidetracked. Anyway, so the benefits of applying components to the traditional male value system. And now we're gonna look at what behaviors and values and attributes have been overlooked or challenged today as benefits to the traditional male value system. Okay, so the following three areas: strength, stability, and resilience. Traditional masculinity has long provided a foundation of strength, honor, and responsibility, fostering stability and resilience in families and communities. Men's roles as providers and protectors have historically contributed to societal security and cohesiveness, especially in times of adversity and crisis. So today, strength, stability, and resilience, which align with toughness and resilience and rejection of some female behaviors, is aligned to. So strength and resilience can be defined as, toughness and resilience can be defined as strength and stability along with resilience. Okay? So those are those behavior attributes that are aligning with the toughness and resilience attributes that we talked about as a primary function of the traditional male value system. Okay? The other areas that have been overlooked and challenged are a sense of purpose and responsibility. And responsibility is going to align with the honor and responsibility components of the traditional male value system we talked about last week. And a sense of purpose, I think, is going to align with the rejection of some of feminine behaviors. Rejection in the sense that so rejection is a pretty powerful word. And I think it needs to be defined, and I'm sure someone's going to absolutely miscategorize the term, but it's just essentially saying that, we're not going to have those behaviors. We're not going to be emotionally supportive. We're not going to show a lot of empathy. We're not interested in, the other things that have been labeled as values for women. And let me just point out that rejection is a bad thing. Okay, you don't want to reject anything for that matter. These are just some of the things that men have seen as a detriment to their value at being a man. So they've just said, no, I'm not going to look at that. And I think in a lot of cases, as we go forward, that's not going to be a good thing. Okay, so let me read you the definition of sense of purpose and responsibilities as overlooked benefits of the traditional male value system. The traditional male value system gives men a clear sense of purpose, anchored in responsibility for family and community. This sense of duty has motivated generations to act with integrity, loyalty, and accountability, building ethical communities based on trust and mutual respect. Now remember, these are overlooked benefits today. Okay? And I'm aligning sense of purpose to rejection of some feminine behavior and responsibility to honor and obviously responsibility. Okay? The two other areas are sacrifice and service. And I'm aligning them to honor and responsibility, sacrifice and service. Traditional masculinity often emphasizes sacrifice and service to others. Men are expected to give their labor, protection, resources, and sometimes even their lives for the benefit of others. While this can come at a personal cost, it also underpinned acts of heroism, selflessness, and communal well-being. Okay? And those are values that, we appreciate as men. And they're aligned to the honor and responsibility component. Okay? We're going to keep going here. All right, so let's talk about courage and perseverance, which aligns to dominance and leadership. Courage in the face of danger, perseverance through hardship, and willingness to take risks have been celebrated masculine traits. These qualities have enabled progress, innovation, and survival through challenging periods in history. History. Not just last week or a century, history, okay? So courage and perseverance aligns with dominance and leadership. Okay. Now we're going to talk about attributes. Sorry, Butch. Butch is going to go outside. All right, there you go, buddy. All right. So work ethic and achievement is aligned to dominance and leadership. Traits such as competitiveness, ambition, and decisiveness often associate with the traditional masculinity. Having driven economic growth, technological advancements, and workplace productivity, these attributes are not inherently negative and remain vital to healthy, functional societies and economies. Dominance and leadership. Okay? And then last but not least is moral code and honor. And I'm going to place moral code and honor under honor and responsibilities. Okay? A strong sense of honor, often linked to traditional masculinity, has historically guided men to uphold moral codes. Okay? Fostering environments where respect and ethical behavior are valued. You think that we have that today? I don't. So this overlooked and challenged mentality is seeking to dismantle harmful aspects of patriarchy and rigid gender roles, sometimes fails to acknowledge the positive contributions of traditional masculinity. The focus on deconstructing outdated norms can overshadow the virtues such as responsibility, sacrifice, and resilience that have helped shape stable societies. Moreover, the current discourse may negate the importance of providing men with a positive identity and sense of purpose, which are crucial for mental health and social cohesion. cohesion. The challenge is to retain these beneficial qualities while promoting a more inclusive and flexible understanding of masculinity that supports men's well-being and adaptive to modern realities. Okay? So that last sentence is where I believe we are today. Okay? The challenge being, why are men struggling today? The challenge is to retain some of these beneficial qualities, while promoting a more inclusive and flexible understanding of masculinity that supports men's well-being and adaptation to modern realities. And what I can tell you now is, in my opinion, my humble opinion, is that we have a lot of people, a lot of predominant people reporting on how bad men have it today, citing data and all this information on how bad men are doing. And I think that that's good data. I do. I think that that's relevant, good data. It confirms this struggle of why men are struggling today. It's just another variable confirming this. What I'm trying to do is to create a foundation for us to acknowledge that, yeah, some of these benefits have been overlooked and have been challenged today. How do we rewrite them? How do we create a positive, narrative that also promotes a more inclusive and flexible understanding of masculinity that not only supports men's well-being, but also acknowledges some of the changes that have happened in a positive way for women? Okay? That's what I want to make sure. Like, the one thing I know to be true, and then I'll get off my soapbox, is that in order for men to fully understand the content in this podcast, women have to be a part of this education. Okay? Some women are going to vehemently deny that they want to be any part of this, and I get that. Okay? But men aren't emotional. Men don't see the world as women do, which is a component that needs to be drilled into females' heads, is that we don't see the world the way that you do. But most smart and intelligent, open-minded men can understand that some of these changes that have happened today in our society are beneficial to women, and we need to recognize that. And that's the challenge. How do we recognize your benefits while also keeping our benefits and not being overlooked and overshadowed and challenged all the time? I'm not saying that we shouldn't be challenged, but to remove dynamics that have been in place historically for a long period of time, it's going to take some time to change. Okay. And okay. One more statement. By preserving the virtues of strength, honor, and responsibility, we ensure the continuity of a legacy that has shaped societies throughout history, acknowledging the positive contributions of traditional masculinity while embracing progress allows men to navigate the complexities of the modern world with resilience, purpose, and integrity. In summary, while it's necessary to critique and evolve traditional gender norms, the new mentality sometimes overlooks the stability, motivating, and community-building benefits that traditional male value systems have historically provided. And that's what we're saying here, right? That's what I want you to understand. Why are men struggling? Well, here are some of the reasons. You know, we have been, I'm not going to say stripped, but we have been bulldozed to believe that some of the things that are built into our DNA and have been taught by our fathers and our father's father, our grandparents and beyond, are no longer relevant. And we've had no effective response to that. We've just sat here and been like, okay, right? Because we didn't ever think that this could happen to us. We didn't think that these changes and overlooked benefits of the traditional male value system would come back full circle and put us into a ditch, right? And that's where we are, guys. We're in a ditch trying to figure out what's happened. The smoke is cleared and we're looking around going, what the fuck just happened? You know? And then, because we don't know, we're just like, okay, is that the new norm? Okay. And I'm telling you that we need to really reconsider collectively as a community of men. So please just join my private Discord server for men only, where we can communicate and collaborate in a positive way that embraces some of the changes that we might not like. Like, that's our role, right? That's our role in being honoring, right? Courage, perseverance, right? Not to attack, right? We want to be better than that. We want to have healthy, non-polarizing debates, questioning what today's current narrative is. And ultimately, we want to defend it, I think. I know I do. You know? So we've talked about some of the overlooked and challenged benefits that the current narrative is not looking at. Now, we're going to talk about how this new mentality has challenged men's sense of purpose and worth through the lens of the traditional male value system. So now you are going to hopefully be able to identify with one or multiple components of why this current narrative isn't working for us. Okay? So, today's overlooked and challenged benefits of the traditional male value system as it pertains to a man's purpose and worth. There's been a redefinition and critique of traditional masculinity. The current era has shifted cultural narratives, often framing traditional masculine traits such as stoicism, ambition, and dominance as problematic or inherently harmful. I do think that there's a little truth to that, okay? But this has led many men to feel that their natural instincts and strengths are now sources of shame or targets for criticism rather than virtues to be celebrated. Okay? And I believe that the current narrative is highlighting the negative aspect of the redefinition and critique of traditional male value systems or traditional masculinity. Like, can you identify with that? I fucking sure can. Okay. This new mentality has challenged men's sense of purpose and worth aligned to the traditional male value system by having the loss of clear social roles. As traditional male roles like provider, protector, or leader have been de-emphasized or criticized, many men have found themselves without a clear path to strive for a socially valued identity. I get that. I mean, like, how do you overcome that? I mean, how do you overcome that? The answer is you don't, because look at all the data. We're turning inwardly. telling ourselves we're bad. The dismantling of hierarchies, which once provided structure and a sense of progression, has left some men feeling adrift, amplifying their sense of drift and disconnect. All right, so let's try another one. So another one that the current mentality, how the current mentality has challenged men's sense of purpose and worth is an alienation and identity crisis. And here's a perfect example. The push for emotional vulnerability and accountability, while positive in some respects, has sometimes been accompanied by rhetoric that paints masculinity itself as the root of social problems. I'm going to read that again because Butch is having a fucking panic attack. Alienation and identity crisis. The push for emotional vulnerability and accountability, while positive in some respects, have sometimes accompanied by rhetoric that paints masculinity itself as the root of social problems. This has caused some men to withdraw or shut down. I'm raising my hand. Heightening feelings of isolation. I'm raising my hand. Loneliness. I'm raising my hand. And uncertainty about how to be strong and assertive without being labeled toxic. Let's read that one more time. This has caused some men to withdraw or shut down, highlighting feelings of isolation, loneliness, and uncertainty about how to be strong or assertive without being labeled toxic. It's a complicated problem. And quite frankly, I don't think we've answered it, or at the very least, even talked about it, right? Had a say in how we feel about it. I got this all day long. You only get this for this podcast, but this is all day long for this guy, okay? So what are some of the current mentality? How has some of the current mentality changed men's sense of purpose? Mental health consequences. The rising crisis of purpose and identity is reflected in rising rates of male loneliness and suicide. For example, male suicide rates have increased significantly, and loneliness among men has spiked, suggesting that men are struggling to find meaning and connection in the new cultural landscape. I mean, I think this is, if you're a man and you haven't felt this, that means that you're making $100 million a year and you don't really care and you've just ignored it. You know what I mean? And it's not a challenge for you anymore. But you're everyday blue collar worker, white collar worker. Hey! Holy cow! Sorry. This is prevalent and relevant, and I think the heart of the issue. Okay. Followed up by social stigma and fear of expression. Men may fear being canceled or publicly shamed for expressing traditional values or for making mistakes, leading to self-censorship and reluctance to engage openly in conversation about gender identity or their own struggles. Right? This guy, I'll just keep my mouth shut. I'm going to hang out at my house. I'm not going to leave it. I'm going to have a job that allows me to work from home. I'm going to isolate and stay in the healing house. That's what my therapist calls it, the healing house. And I've healed here for sure, but I still got a long way to go. All right. And finally, undermining the merit-based hierarchies. The rejection of hierarchies, even those based on merit, has removed framework that has once helped channel competitiveness and cooperation into positive growth. Without these, some men feel the lack of legitimate ways to lead, excel, or contribute meaningfully to the society. In summary, today's mentality has challenged men's sense of purpose and worth by critiquing traditional masculine roles, removing their clear societal frameworks, and sometimes stigmatizing masculine traits, leading to an increase in alienation, identity struggle, and mental health challenges for men. That's today's podcast. So a point I want to make sure that everybody understands is that if you can identify with even 1% of what was discussed today, you have a reason to join our private mail-only Discord server to have an open dialogue and contribute to how our long-term narrative could be rewritten. The short term is a whole different animal. This stuff is going to happen over a period of time, which begs the question, what does that mean for me? Well, that's in a whole nother podcast. We're going to spend a lot of time focusing on how these challenges have been overlooked and what it is that you can do what is it that you can do as an individual to grow personally if you elect to. I mean, I don't want to force anyone to think that they have to do any of this stuff, but if you can identify with this shit, let's get rocking. So the community is going to be a place where we can collaborate and discuss how we want our long-term narrative to be structured, how we answer challenging questions that we don't know how to answer today or haven't figured out a way to do that. It's even a place where you can come and freaking vent and share your frustration and loneliness and talk about being scared or lonely in a private setting. I mean, that's another component too of all this, is that, you know, we got a lot of angry dudes out there who don't know what's going on with them and are angry about it. But most importantly, what I want to make sure that all of you have an understanding of is the simple fact that this information that I'm sharing with you, if you can identify with it, I don't want it to be used. I'm hoping, and I know I'm going to be disappointed. My expectation is someone's going to do something, but I'm hoping that we can maintain a level of privacy and not get into polarizing debates on who's right and who's wrong. Because in today's society, we don't have constructive debates. We have polarizing debates highlighting one group versus another group, yelling at each other about why they're wrong and why they're right. And what does that do for the greater good? What does that do for the whole? Absolutely nothing. It creates no harmony. It creates no mutual understanding. You have no empathy. It's about being right or wrong. And in this case, I'm not suggesting that you could be right and wrong and have a conversation with somebody. We just don't know how to do it anymore. And we have one chance at this. One chance. So I beg you from the bottom of my heart that you be patient. Get active, involved with the Discord community, and let's have a conversation. And at the right time, whenever that may be, we can collectively decide when we want to go public, or how we want and how we want to defend our narrative for the benefit of all of us, including the females. Now, this is not what they've done. They've attacked us, and rightfully so. I get why. I totally get it. But that doesn't mean I like it. And that doesn't mean we have to do the same, right? Let's be honorable. Let's be humble. And let's collaborate and figure this out together. There is one person that I do want to highlight, and I have highlighted on my podcast, that I think was the spearhead of what it is that we're talking about today. And he isn't doing it in the capacity that I am, or didn't do it in the capacity that I'm doing it, but I think he opened up a lot of people's eyes, mostly from a humor perspective. And that is Kevin Samuels. If you don't know who Kevin Samuels is, you should Google him, or go on TikTok and look at what he's done. I've added him as a contributor to this podcast, but he's never contributed anything. But his approach and his purpose for doing what he was doing as an image consultant, I think, speaks to some of the topics that we have to embrace today, especially among women. And he focused primarily in the Black community. He's from Atlanta, and he died suddenly in 2022, which is a shame. I think he was on to something really good, but we can pick up where he left off, and jump in with both feet. So check him out if you want to see how he approaches conversations. And to be candid with you, he's painfully honest. I'm talking like painfully honest. And it's funny. It's, he's just calling it the way that he sees it. And you got to give the guy credit for that. He's a pioneer. He's the first one to talk about it. And mad props to you, Kevin Samuels. Your content still lives on, and I respect and admire what you are trying to accomplish and how you are trying to do it. I'm just choosing to try to do it in a different way. Okay. And so please check out Kevin Samuels. He's never contributed to the podcast, but he's someone who has influenced me. And most importantly, remember, don't subscribe to the YouTube channel. Don't subscribe to any of my podcasts. None of this information is relevant or important, and you don't need to share with anyone. Okay. Where men can be men, wink, wink, right? And that's it. So in closing, I don't know what our next podcast is going to be about, but I don't know what our next podcast is going to be. You're going to have to stay tuned. Okay. But please, if you're listening to this out of order, I'm probably going to do a podcast about how you should listen to our episodes, and you should listen to them in order. They're in chronological order for a reason, starting with the introduction of the who, what, where, and how we're going to present this information to the marketplace. And then my last two, including this, are going to be focused around the traditional male value system and the overlooked benefits and challenged narratives that are associated with that. Okay? So that's all I got for you now. I'm psyched. I think this went well. And we're 40 minutes into this thing. I'll see you on the next one, where men can be men.